And yes, I would love to start us off with the question of vision before we get into the introduction and into the topic. What we basically do when we're not sort of in Alpbach is really to bring the entire agri-food sector together around this question: how do we build this union of water, food, nature? And just to quickly read you something that has been written by leaders across the entire European agri-food sector, representing all stakeholder groups, large food corporations, NGOs, farmers, sort of the banking, the insurance, the policy space, just to show what is the potential we have here. I'd like to read you a couple of sentences. We envision European agri-food systems whose intricate and interdependent networks of life, from microscopic organisms to entire bioregions, are continuously increasing their life-holding capacity. Here, the collective wisdom of past and present land stewards guide decisions made in service of future generations. Soil is healthy and teeming with life, water flows abundantly through its natural cycles, and biodiversity thrives. Food is not a commodity, but a shared resource, accessible, nourishing, and rooted in local context. Decentralized and inclusive governance ensures equity, dignity, and shared responsibility, fostering systems where life can thrive and be celebrated in its many forms. We know and realize our role as humans is to enable living systems as they unfold, acknowledging their inherent complexity and capacity for regeneration. At the heart of our vision exists a simple yet profound question: does this action support life in all of its forms to flourish? This has been written not by a group of hippies. This has been written by people that run large corporations, that advocate for EU CAP changes, that run large divisions in banks, etc. This is a shared vision we are building across the entire European agri-food sector. On the other hand, there's the large potential. We can live in this world, right? Like we can build this world. We know that this is possible. We also know the risk situation. Just yesterday, a friend of mine published an article in Forbes writing about just the water risk. We have about 8.5 trillion euros in assets that are either at high or moderate risk due to water mismanagement. And we are not acknowledging this. We are not talking about this nearly enough. The same numbers could be quoted for biodiversity, of course, right? So this is, and I'm talking economic numbers right now, but there are humans that are behind all of this that in the end are affected. So we have the amazing potential. We have the amazing risk. We are in the middle of a crisis that is fundamental. And so this conversation is incredibly timely. And so I would love to get into it. A quick introduction. I'm going to go left to right here. Nick Steiner is a friend, former colleague, and one of the foremost advocates for the restoration of water cycles in the European context. I'm incredibly happy that he is here because his vision is really to go beyond the reduction of damage. Like, we are not just trying to reduce how much water we use, but we're trying to restore and regenerate water cycles. And this is incredibly exciting. Jessika Roswall, Commissioner for Environment, Water Resilience and Competitive Circular Economy. A very long title, but incredibly exciting topics. I believe the nature restoration law falls under this. The new nature credit idea falls under this. And the whole biodiversity topic. So major topics, extremely exciting. I'm really glad that you could make it today. Lenio, the last name I'm not going to try. Myrivili. Okay, not so bad. Thank you very much. I think Global Heat Officer. What an incredible title. Absolutely relevant, and one of the foremost thinkers on how do we work with heat and the integration of nature in cities in order to deal with heat. So incredibly interesting. Really glad that Martin is here. Martin Frick, Director of the Deputy Director? Sorry? World Food Program in Germany, in Berlin, and working, of course, on the topics of how do we feed the populations that are in dire situations, in the sort of limits that we have around water and the impacts of climate change. So really, really great panel we have here. I would love to give a few minutes to each one here on the panel, starting with Nick, continuing with Lenio, Martin, and with Jessika, on how can we work with these different topics, each from the different perspectives. I would love to start with Nick, because he brings that perspective really from the ground, working directly with land stewards on the topics of water.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would like to ask you all to think about the last time you spoke with a farmer and they said, this year the rain was exactly the right amount and exactly at the right time. For me, 10 years working with farmers, I haven't heard this sentence once. This is always the problem, and unfortunately it's getting worse. We're seeing more extremes. And when we talk about the climate, it's usually about carbon. That's the main thing we always talk about. But when we look at what's happening, we have droughts, we have fires, and we have floods. And they're often happening in the same regions. It's a cycle. And all of these are clear signs of a disrupted water cycle. And so this is something where we can tackle the problem directly on the ground. And the good thing is also that this work can happen really fast. And we can do the work directly. Because what we're seeing all over Europe, we have longer periods of droughts followed by extreme rain events. And this is pretty much the same everywhere. The patterns are getting more extreme. It's like a metronome that just keeps swinging and swinging. And the big problem is that our landscapes are not able to handle these extremes. So we have completely covered everything in concrete. Everything is paved. We've destroyed the natural ecosystems. And so when these rains come, they cause destruction. And this is a major issue of land use that we kind of ignore all the time. And so if you imagine if we had the magic carbon sucker 9000, we could take all the carbon out of the atmosphere to pre-industrial levels. It might still take 60 to 100 years before we see any changes. And this is if everything goes perfectly. And, well, we know it's not quite going perfectly. So what else can we do? And what can we do that works today? And this is where water cycle restoration really comes in. And farmers are at the forefront. They notice this directly. You know, when we think about polar bears, it's really far away. But here it's food production. It's groundwater that is running out. And we need to think about groundwater like our bank accounts. We're only drilling deeper. We're only taking out. And we're never, in the theme of this event, we're not recharging. And this is what we need to be doing. We need to recharge groundwater because rain comes. It's like someone comes around with a massive box full of gold, but we just don't have the capacity to take it. And this is how we need to start looking at water. We need to treat it like gold, and we need to bring it into the land. And so this is also directly what we're doing on the ground. So we're helping landowners all over Europe to build landscapes that can handle these extremes. So we're slightly reshaping the land. We're building it in a way that when it rains, the water gets intercepted, it gets distributed across the landscape, it gets stored in ponds, it gets infiltrated into the landscape, and there trees are able to take it up. Water that flows on the landscape goes into pipes, gets lost. But this water, when it's down in the aquifers, we have trees that can take it up. And trees are our best air conditioning units. So I guess we will hear more about that in the heat effect. And these are the landscapes that we can create. The big problem is that it's really difficult for us. So with Water Stories, we're not only doing this work on the ground, we're also training thousands of people around the world to do this work and training them to build businesses around it. The big issue is that when we're on the ground, we have many projects that are fully funded. We're there, we have the equipment, we have the skill, we have the financing, but many times this work is still illegal. So we're not allowed to work on the ground because of nature protection. We're not allowed to move the soil, and we're not allowed to restore wetlands. We're not allowed to do this work. And this would be my main message today, is like, how is it possible that trying to restore these ecosystems and trying to restore water cycles is made so difficult? Ideally, there should be subsidies to support this work because it works on the ground, it works today. But unfortunately, today, it's often still illegal. And so many projects around the world that are happening, they have to be done what we often call pre-legal. Because we know that at some point this must be legal because it only makes sense. But so far we're still struggling. And I would love to, kind of open the discussion to that, of what we can do, that this simple work, effective work can happen, and that ideally it even gets supported.
Thank you very much for the opening. And I think really this was an almost perfect segue for the amazing work that you are doing. I think maybe one question, like what I've seen in the preparation, is that you're really advocating for a fundamental rethink in the way we think about heat and the future of cities. I would love to hear you talk a bit about that.
Sure. Nick, thank you very much. He talked exactly about what the issues are, and I just want to say that behind all the things that Nick talked about is heat. It's extreme heat. We're heating up the planet, and locally we're dealing with extreme heat waves and extreme periods of increasing high temperatures. And these create droughts and create fires and create then also moisture goes up into the atmosphere, and they create these flash floods that we've been seeing, which then we deal with land erosion and all these different issues. So when I worked originally in Athens, I was the deputy mayor in Athens and started understanding that heat is a really big issue, and then I realized that other cities around the world also are not really preparing for extreme heat. And extreme heat, they were preparing for other things, water issues, more than heat issues. And so then I started to work with networks of cities, and now I'm working with the UN. That's why I'm I have this crazy title of global heat officer. So when the idea is that I work mostly with cities, and I try to help them create plans and policies so that they can first save people, because we have heat is the highest killer than any other extreme weather phenomena globally. And also so to save people and save lives and livelihoods, but also to create cities that are more beautiful and to rethink of how we design our cities, because we've designed our cities based on fossil fuel, consumption. So all the ways that we do our cities have very much to do with fossil fuels, and we don't use the local knowledge and the types of amazing historical wisdom that has come into design for years and years, when people actually built cities and built settlements based on the ways that they were dealing with the weather of their region and of their city. And we've lost that, because we have the ways to heat and cool buildings and walk and move around in ways that are not based on how. So cities are not shaded, and we don't design cities that are shaded. Cities do not kind of deal with wind kind of going by. Buildings do not deal with how they can be passively cooling, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to kind of rethink of how we do all this. And the best way to do it is with nature. I mean, one of the best allies that we had, as Nick said, is nature-based solutions. And what is nature-based solutions? We kind of use that term very loosely. I think a very good rule of thumb is this very short way of talking about them is solutions that are good for nature and good for people. So I think this is an easy way to understand, because, for example, a hydroelectric plant might be good for people and feel like it's a green solution, but it's not a nature-based solution, because it's not necessarily good for nature. So as we kind of think of nature-based solutions for cities, it became to me more and more clear, more and more obvious, working with cities, that we have to go beyond the boundaries of the city and actually kind of think about how, because nature is not something that you can actually curtail and keep in a very specific thing. You need, in order to have healthy nature-based solutions, you have ideally to create connectivity and to create biodiversity. And in order to do that, our cities ideally have to connect with our peri-urban areas, which has to do with creating healthy agroforestry, ideally, so bringing forest and agriculture together, and peri-urban forests that can keep our cities cooler. So ideally, the most beautiful cities would be crisscrossed by long green corridors, green and blue corridors, that connect to the peri-urban areas, that have mixed agriculture and forestry that kind of work together. And these would be cities that people would be living happily in and would be healthier cities, because we know that these types of cities keep people mentally more happy, and these kinds of, I usually think of how the opposite of all this is the hot city, the city that is the areas where the poorer people are suffering more than anything, because the poor neighborhoods are the ones that are more impacted by extreme heat. So I think of cities as pockets of vulnerability where heat kind of goes in and discovers, where are my poor people, where are my old people, where are my really young kind of kids that are playing outside, where are the people with pre-existing conditions or mental illness. All of these are really vulnerable to extreme heat, and these are the ones we can protect. And then the opposite of that is this crazy blue and green city that can be a place where we can be healthy and where we can protect our most vulnerable and where we can have food security, because that's, heat, I'll stop here. Heat affects all systems. And water is the most crucial kind of node. Thank you. The water system is the node that can unlock all of the protection of all these things that we're talking about, because of extreme heat, our ecosystems are particularly stressed, and they need more water than they've ever needed before. So we need to protect our water systems in order to be able to do anything to protect us from heat.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be the moderator that I usually get on a panel like this. I'm going to be like, oh yeah, this is a very, very nice vision. This sounds very beautiful. But of course, we need to feed the world, right? And we need to, and like all of this, like agroforestry is very, very nice. But like we can't feed the world like this, right, Martin?
The segue for me first. Thank you, Ivo, and apologies for my voice. I'm just recovering from a bad cold. I hope it holds. Protecting the most vulnerable, and you just said it. That's basically our job at the World Food Programme, biggest humanitarian organization in the world. And it's a big one. We have 340 million people who depend on humanitarian aid currently, and our funding is maybe just there where we have 100 million that we can support, and we cannot support them well enough. So that's definitely not a solution. Now, if we look from a water perspective, we have 3/4 of the people we need to look after in water-scarce area. If you look at the map where the world hunger is, it is almost identical to the world map of water scarcity. If you look at the impacts of natural disaster, and I'm reluctant to speak about natural disasters because they are man-made disasters and nature strikes back. But if you look at the impact, 3/4 of these impacts are water related. So it's very simple. If you have a closed system like a planet with water on it and you heat it up, you will have more violent reactions. You will have longer droughts, you will have more extreme rainwater events, you will see all the impacts that we are seeing here. Now, I mentioned the insufficiency of humanitarian aid, because this is going to stay with us. We will have more people in food insecurity, and we will have less money to deal with the people. This is again where water comes out. And indeed where the hope is very simple, very old rainwater harvesting techniques. It is bringing back arable land into being arable land. And that is one of the stories we hear way too seldom. We always hear that we don't have land enough, but we don't hear that anywhere between 40 and 60% of the world's land is actually moderately to severely degraded. That's horrible, and it's also an enormous opportunity, because what is degraded can be brought back to life. And I would even dare to say that repairing the damage that we have caused in the 20th century might be the biggest job engine for the 21st century. So if we have any chance to ensure that we have no hunger on this planet, that we don't need to feed people with humanitarian aid, we need to start helping them restoring their land. Now, this is a session not about problems in Africa or in South Asia, but about Europe. And what I love, and Commissioner, you have a wonderful job description, because it brings together really the core elements that need to be brought together. In Europe, I would say maybe our biggest challenge is experts. And that sounds polemic, because I'm labeled an expert myself. And it's not that these experts have wonderful knowledge about their different areas. The trick is bringing it together. 4 years ago, there was the Food System Summit of the Secretary General of the United Nations. I had the pleasure to play a role in that, and the whole point was to call it a Food System Summit, to raise the awareness of farmers not being producers of food as car manufacturers produce cars, but being the integral interface between humans and nature, and ensuring that the cycles we have so often interrupted are being closed again. Now, water is the point in case, because our disasters, even in developed countries, are mostly water related. Think about the flash floods. Think about extended droughts. We have situations you wouldn't guess, like in 100 kilometers north of Berlin, the rainfall data look like the rainfall data in Mali. They have the same level of water scarcity, which you wouldn't have guessed. But on the other side, all of our urban infrastructure is not built to the levels of rainfall that we are seeing currently. So you see the sewage system flooded, you see enormous damage. The solution to all of that is in what people knew for the last 10,000 years, but somehow we forgot. To integrate our life support systems, the very systems that ensure that we have air to breathe, food to eat, water to drink, and to ensure that every human activity is integrating in these cycles and is not disrupting them. And so an integrated nature union is a point in case. This is exactly what we need. And in urban planning, if we do it without nature, we will pay the price. If we build our infrastructure in the mountains, we are here in wonderful Tyrol, and the land is sliding because the way we work on the slopes is not sustainable, we will pay a price. So the integration is really, I think, the point in case here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So, in summary, sort of, before I hand this to you, we have the sort of large water issues that are very much man-made, and we have ways to solve that sort of on the local level. We can integrate nature in the land, in the landscape, and in cities. This is also a way to produce the food we need around the world and restore our landscapes. We end up saving money probably in a lot of different ways and reduce our risk, reduce our exposure to risk from extreme weather events, but also from hunger and global crises. So this seems like something that is a win-win, win-win for everyone. In what I'm hearing when I'm in Brussels is sort of the things that sort of are in your area are often treated as a cost factor, but it sounds like it's a great, money saver and huge potential. I'm wondering, how do you experience that, and how do we turn this into such a great opportunity, leveraging all of these local solutions?
Thank you very much, and I agree. But I just want to start with saying the things that we're talking about, and you started with the word vision. For me, it's the first time here in the forum, but I really like this meeting together, both here, of course, in this panel, but also outside in the corridors and discussing these things. Then vision needs to be action. So that is maybe sometimes the difficult part. But I believe that together is the key word there. I would add one thing, how we can do the action, I think, is unity. And in Europe, we have, and especially in these geopolitical difficult times that we have wars, we have conflicts, we have trade wars, we have climate change and all this. And of course, European unity is important on these topics, but also on the climate and environmental challenges that we have. And how to connect that with the question you had on the cost, if you may say so. And I do truly understand the quote that you did, because I just have one figure that I use very often. It's from ECB. That 75% of the corporate loans taken by European companies within the Eurozone is dependent at least one ecosystem, water. So, I mean, of course there is a connection. They are linked. So, and I totally agree with you. We have to see this as an investment. And a little bit, that is how I think in my daily work, and back also to farming and see that. Of course, we talk a lot about competitiveness in Europe now because we need the economic growth so we can invest in all these things that we need to do. But it's also about our security and resilience, also due to its climate change, but also the war and conflicts around us. And here farming is, and agriculture is about our security, food production, and resilience. And as you already said, farmers are under huge pressure and from climate change, from water scarcity, floods and droughts, sometimes at the same time actually, biodiversity loss and all this. So what can we do then? We have put forward a vision for agriculture and food that is trying to have a vision on how to make farming and agriculture future-proof. And I think we already mentioned some of the challenges, so to say. And it looks different all over Europe, I would say also. It's not like I'm coming from Sweden, we have a totally different farming than in Austria, for example. Just want to add something. I totally agree with you when you said, Nick, when you said it's getting worse. So, I mean, it's an urgency also in this. Other things, when it comes to seeing, and yes, it will cost, but it is also an investment, and I don't see any contradiction between these things. And I keeping repeating myself, the competitiveness, investing in our businesses in Europe is no contradiction to green transition. And the figure 75% is just one, but it's a lot of other things that we know. I mean, data centers, for example, know that they are dependent on huge amount of water. Car industry, farming, obviously. But so we are linked in this together. But to be honest, public money will never be enough. So we need to be innovative also in other solutions. And you mentioned nature credits in the beginning, and that is something that I work very hard on. And President von der Leyen said for like 2 years ago that we need to put nature on the balance sheet. And that is what we're trying to do. With that said, I would say it's not easy. Because how can you measure nature in a sustainable way without greenwashing, all these things. But I think it's possible, and I do think it's a momentum now. Because when I meet industries and people and farmers, we need to have these measuring methods. And I think we need it on a global level, of course, but I think we need to start, there are examples starting also already in Europe. So that I'm looking forward to. Just finally, on water, because that is, everything is linked, that is one thing. But I have put forward a water resilience strategy in earlier this spring. And I'm very proud to be a commissioner. I have the best portfolio, absolutely. I'm very happy with that. And it's linked all over. But I'm the first commissioner with water in my title. And of course, the title is not the most important thing, but it is showing that water is a top priority for politicians in Europe now. Should have been earlier, you can say, but don't cry. I mean, now is now and look forward. And we have taken water for granted too long. And that, of course, is different in Europe, but also different in the world. But we need to do that. So we have the strategy. It's the beginning of a journey. I know it doesn't have all the solutions yet, but it is the beginning, and we need to do this together. But it builds on three things. Broken water cycle, already been touched. I think that is key. It's also a smart water economy. How can we use the water more efficient? And that is something that I've been criticized and cherished for, so I think we landed very good in the middle, to be honest. But anyway, it's also big. And here I do think that Europe have a lot of innovation to build on. And then, of course, water is life. Water is a human right. Water is something that we all need. So we need to get affordable water for everyone. And that is not only a European work, it's also a global work that we're doing. So we're a little bit all around there. So but my message would be that visions we have, but we need to have visions with action. So that is what I think is important.
Thank you so much. If I can ask one follow-up question, then I would love to invite questions or input from the audience. Of course, we all try to keep it as short as possible so we can hear many people. One follow-up question. So one of the things that I sort of hear from everybody is there are a lot of very bottom-up solutions, right? It's very much, okay, here's a farm and here's, like a small dam and a small pond, and so we plant trees in the neighborhood, and like it's very, very, very small, almost more than, let's say, industry implementing larger scale projects. I'm wondering how could the EU empower these very grassroots initiatives to restore biodiversity, water cycles, all of these things? We're working with people on the ground every day, and we see there is so much willingness to do it, and people feel like, oh, we're actually disempowered from it. And that's a pity, because there's so much energy.
I would say one of the challenges that I see around Europe is that there is this willingness and this innovative and these solutions, but we need to scale them up. That is how we build economic growth. So and that is also how we can use it in a bigger level. I think that is the challenge that we see, and that is not only on water issues; it's on other things also. And here we can use funding, we can use the innovatives that is in Europe. And one thing that I'm working with also to get this scale up is to make use of the single market with this fantastic 450 million people that we have. So that is one thing. So I think that is more of my challenge, because absolutely there is this small bottom-up that is important, and I build a lot of things of my work on dialogue. I think that is key. But the challenge I see is the scale-up, actually.
Interesting. Thank you. I'm curious, is there input, questions from the audience? And of course, we're aiming to have this as much as possible as a conversation. Maximilian.
Good morning. I'm not from the sector, but I follow for decades with wonder the great developments in permaculture and in syntropic farming, and I know the good examples from Portugal, Spain, and pretty much everywhere, and also what they do in China. And on the other hand, when I read all the newsletters and media, I don't hear hardly anything of regenerative farming and nature things, except for maybe agri-tech and drones dropping seeds. So what are the programs, what kind of nature do they have that are helpful? Are they deeply understanding nature, or are they technical fixes that also have great relevance? Where it has very different people involved in this with very different mindsets. So where are the kind of developments that you see?
There's an echo, so sometimes it might be difficult to understand. I don't know if anything can be done about it. But the question, I think, is like there are a lot of important solutions happening across Europe on the ground. Permaculture, syntropic agriculture, you mentioned as examples, and regenerative agriculture, and we don't necessarily always hear about them in the media. It's not a big topic. Is that anyone would like to? I mean, I know you are working very closely with farmers. Would you like to respond to this?
Yeah, maybe I can quickly get into, because you also mentioned drones. So a lot of people think, okay, we need high-tech AI solutions, and that's why we don't need to think about climate, because in the end, AI will fix everything. And it's so much more important to actually think back, and that was mentioned by pretty much everyone here. Things that have worked for thousands of years, those are the best solutions. Like the planet, water cycles, everything was in balance before we thought we knew better than nature. And so this is what we need to go back to. And these solutions are so much cheaper, they're so much better, but the big problem that I'm seeing is a lot of people are hunting for VC money. And so if you want VC money, you need something that has a patent. Moving soil from A to B and planting trees and actually working on the ground is really hard to get a patent on, so no one is interested in investing. So I think there's a very big thing where we need to kind of rethink, and where on the ground action needs to happen. This is also where the farmers come in that we work with, because they clearly see a financial return on this. They either have products to produce or not. And so I think we need to focus clearly on the point of money that you can actually make with these solutions. And one technical example, I'm also working with a luxury hotel in southern Spain. And it was designed in a way that, it never rains here, we don't have to think about water. Every time it rains, the hotel floods. And they have carpets that cost 10,000 euros. And it's just in their budget that every time there's a heavy rain, they throw away 50 to 200,000 euros worth of inventory. And they invited me to a conference there, and I said, I'm only coming if we're also doing work on the ground. And luckily they said yes. So we started building rain gardens, and I told them, look, this wall, if you put this 10 centimeters higher, you add a rain gutter here, you slightly change this, and you infiltrate the water there, those problems go away. And now for a few thousand euros, they've solved this thing that was just clear in their minds. And so I think this is what we need. In the nature world, a lot of people love nature, but have no understanding of return on investment. And we need to get this thinking into our nature people, because there's so much return on investment. There's so much money that can be saved and money that can be made. But if people don't know how, it's difficult.
I think it's, so just quickly, and I think it's such a great example, like we have that, let's say, on the farm or on the hotel. But of course we have that on the larger scale as well. A city like Valencia has been flooded. Well, a couple of rain gutters, meaning the agricultural soil around it, could have done something about this. But we rather spend the money on rebuilding than on prevention and local solutions. I know that there's also points here, and from Martin.
I just wanted to ask the Commissioner, it must be difficult in your job to bring together the biodiversity and even the new kind of nature law that was voted in, which we're very happy that finally did, with the common agricultural CAP, the policies, and how often these are difficult to kind of pull together, because there's a lot of pull and push between, and this is, I think, why Ivo's question was interesting, and I would like to push it a little bit, because the CAP hasn't been supporting the small agriculture, kind of the more organic, the more the ones that, because of course there's a pull to bigger production and all that stuff. So I'm wondering, how are you struggling, and how do you think there are solutions for these types of things? Just to push you a little bit.
Yeah. So I said it is, not as a joke, but I didn't take this job because it's easy. That is true.
That would have been
exactly. But with that said, I mean, one thing it's linked. I mean, one thing that I'm struggling with is the communication. And disinformation is one thing that we have in climate and environment that is huge. And that's not the answer on your question, but I think a lot about this, because we need the examples that you bring up. We need to show people and businesses, to bring them along, that this is an investment, not the cost and the return. And the cost of doing nothing, from the example of Valencia, is huge. And that, of course, insurance companies understand, and of course others also. So, and when it comes to, I think it's, we in politics sometimes works in silos. I have to admit that is not the way forward. Of course, we need to work together. And when it comes to also within the Commission, for example, and I'm working, of course, very close with my Commissioner colleague Christoph Hansen on agriculture, because we need to do this together. And again, I'm also doing a lot of dialogue with farmers, and we don't always agree. But that's not the meaning of democracy, of course. But I think there is this common understanding that we need to do this for a future. So I'm still hopeful, but it's not easy. And then, you know, we are in the discussion on the next MFF and the next CAP and all this, and that is, well, it will take too long. I will not. But it's not easy. But I think there is a common understanding where we want to go. That I can say. But I think communication-wise, and here I think we all have important jobs to do so.
Martin, do you want to?
Very briefly, yes. Real change is happening when we challenge our assumptions. And the assumptions that are most difficult to challenge are those about which we don't think. Ivo mentioned one. So we are 8 billion people now, we might be 10 billion people soon, so we need to produce more food. Nonsense, we don't. Because we have enough food for 10 billion people. We need to think about consumption, about usage, all of that. Another of these tacit assumptions is rainfall. Oh, rainfall, that's a God-given. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, and we just react to that. And water management basically means water engineering, pipes and dams. There was at the Venice Biennale for Architecture was a wonderful exhibition about Greece. Photos from the 1950s where about 52 dams, water retention dams, were inaugurated with the brass band and the mayor and cutting ribbon. And they had pictures of the very same water retention basins today. They were all empty. Why? Because they didn't take into consideration the catchment area, the natural system around it. So it was just looked at as an engineering problem. And to your question, I think we are not talking about a little solution here or a little solution there, but a systemic lens to open and say, so why is it so hot in our cities? Why do we have huge damages because of landslides and extreme rain? And what is the entire interaction between humans and the natural system, and how do we fix it? And I think that's the challenge.
One thing I find so interesting listening to everybody is like there seems to be a common pattern of humans implementing technology into the landscape, let's see. Let's take this hotel, right? Like we build that hotel into the landscape in the way that we want to build a hotel. And well, then nature is like, well, you know, you build that in a place where there's going to be flooding, right? At Valencia, most of the areas that were flooded were in a flood area. So they were built in an area that was meant to be flooded. And where we don't take into account the local conditions and what nature wants to do. So the cost saving that comes with working with the environment, that comes with working with nature, not in an abstract, fluffy, etc. way, but in a very concrete and cost saving and profitable way, right? Just want, like, I know that we're running out of time. Is there another burning question in the audience? Yes, please. And there's a microphone coming.
Hello, my name is Vuk, I'm a young biologist, so what I want to mention is migrants. I know that's a hot topic in Europe, that Europe usually don't like migrants, and if I ask you to do a 5 ethnicities, you would say Chinese, I don't know, so on, you won't find the answer. But something that's very problematic because of the environment, and I'm a young biologist, are the nature migrants, and I'm speaking here about invasive species. Currently, with the climate change, we have a big pressure, especially in the Mediterranean Sea and the Adriatic Sea. And I know these are occurring topics, popular topics in scientific circles, but not much in civilian circles. If I ask you to number few of the invasive species in your populations, in your country, in your communities, you probably wouldn't know. And that it's very dangerous in the sense of the globalization. That's a very expensive problem, and even more extremely expensive problem to find the solutions. Do we have any more innovating approaches or any more strategies to dealing with that? Thank you.
So I think the innovation, I'm just a politician, and I think you are the brain who thinks those innovative things. So, but of course, you're pointing on one of the big challenges that we have, and we are updating from the European Commission, I don't know, every year or every second year, not second year, but on what the species are. And I know the cost is enormous. To be honest, I know the most from Sweden because I follow that closely, of course, and it's in my own backyard, so to say. And here, it's been mentioned earlier, the nature restoration regulation is one part on how to restore nature, but I know the cost is important. And here again, public money will not be enough. We need also new innovations. We need also, here again, the farmers on board to also tackle these challenges. So I do believe in technology. I do believe in innovation. So I think there are solutions. But some of these species that has been also growing for a long time, so it's not easy to get rid of them, if you may say so.
Can I jump on this question?
Yeah. 1 or 2 minutes.
this whole idea of migration is very interesting with species, right? Because we're seeing species moving north, and we call it plant migration, which is a very interesting issue because I was going to say, after Ivo spoke, that what I really believe in is landscape architects. I love landscape architects. I think that they're going to save us. And the young people, especially that are coming out of landscape architecture today, they know so much about how to deal with water, how to measure water, how to create like the right, and all of the, or species, or, you know, how to actually thermodynamics. They have incredible knowledge, and they put it all together. And we need that kind of knowledge because these types of knowledge is missing from local government and from different government levels. So I'm really like landscape architecture. So the whole idea of invasive species is something we have to rethink, because a lot of our species are under extreme stress, and things that we considered to be bad and invasive, sometimes we have to reconsider them as good because they are more resilient sometimes. And we need the possibility of creating the type of course, this is a big discussion, because when invasive species attacks biodiversity, then we have a problem. But at the same time, sometimes these species are species we could use for specific things that they could be very valuable. And I have very specific trees in my mind telling you this. But so the whole idea of how do we consider local plants and indigenous species, and how we can actually save these indigenous species, which ones we can save and which ones we have to maybe let go because they cannot survive. And they don't help us with the conditions that we are dealing today, both in forestry, agriculture, and cities, is something that people are really looking into. And we are so lucky in Europe to have extraordinary research institutes that do this work, and the EU is really funding these types of research. So if you want to actually learn about it and find it, is free knowledge, which we are really extremely lucky to still have free knowledge institutions that have all this knowledge available to all of us. And seeing what's happening in the US is really, I just want to say that we have to really be very happy and very proud and really, really grateful that we have these institutions that can still give us incredible tools and resources, and that can help us survive the conditions that we are. And this is what we should capitalize on as for the future.
Wonderful point. We will have to move towards closing. If there's anyone here from Alpbach, I think this could absolutely be a lab for like a week next year, and I think this would be a wonderful conversation to have. In closing, with our last, I know I would love to, but like we only have 3 minutes. So in closing, what I would love to ask from you, you mentioned the term indigenous. One of the ideas that come up a lot in our work is the idea of designing for the next 7 generations, right? Like we are designing, we tend to sort of react quickly to the emergencies of the moment, but really sort of we need to think of the long term. Very small question to each one of you, and with like, short answer. What is the one thing that comes to your mind when you think, if we were to design, that union for the next 7 generations, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
A very simple answer. We just need to build decentralized water retention landscapes, because the great thing is when we have the landscape that can handle all these extreme rain events, even if we walk away and we let the land completely alone, it will regenerate. The plants will grow. The seed bank is there. As soon as we add water and we add it in a way that it's not destructive, it will grow. And in 7 generations, these will be flourishing ecosystems full of food, fresh water. I mean, what do we have to lose? So pretty simple.
Very clear, thank you.
Now you're really stretching. I'm a politician, as I said. I'm thinking like in 5 or 4 years of mandate in the next election. So, I mean, but I stretch myself to think about my grandchild. So that is like 2 generations, so 7. So but my answer would be going back to, I mean, water is life. Water is everything. And water is key and should be in all the COPs and everywhere, I think. So fixing the broken water cycle would be the main thing for me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Clear agreement on the water cycles here?
Well, since they've covered the water, I'm gonna go with the trees and say that we need to reforest and do regenerative forests and link them to value and to agriculture, so that it's kind of they create value, and we have people taking care of them because the countryside is emptying out. So we have to make sure that forests are managed so they don't burn so easy, and really try to make sure that we have we're losing forests so fast, I'm terrified. So I think like putting a lot of effort in reforesting and thinking of a continuity between forests up in the mountains and forests in the agricultural land and forests in the cities, and thinking that as a continuum, and thinking of bioregions in the way to protect them and support them is what I would like to focus on.
So I have a feeling we're building natural capital here across Europe. Martin, what about you?
I would say apply the landscape approach to political participation. If you talk to all the people, really all the people, also those who think who are not relevant because they might be in a landscape, you can get the full picture that you need in order to address these issues.
Very, very clear. That is it for today. This was super interesting. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the discussion. Thank you, everybody. I would love to have had even more conversation, but again, maybe we can have a whole weekend or something next year. Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you so much for the team for organizing this.